Hey everybody, we are live. It feels like we're off to a running start here at the beginning of 2025. And a central theme in the news the last week or so has been a sort of dominoes game of progressive projects and people failing or at least floundering. From a slew of companies abandoning DEI principles to Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, finally being chased out of his seat, as well as other international failures on the part of global progressive movements. We're going to be talking about this and more on episode. What episode is this? I forget. I'm sorry. I've already failed. Okay. I am a new host. Anyway, this is the In the Tank podcast. Thanks, guys.
We're going to be changing the name of the Gulf of Mexico to the Gulf of America. What a beautiful name.
It is episode 479. Thank you, and I am sorry. Okay. You might notice that I am not Donald Kendall, unfortunately, who has gone on to great things in the Heartland Institute's Emerging Issues Center, which he is the director of. You guys can count on him swinging by the show frequently, so you don't have to bear with just me forever. He's not gone forever. If you want to keep track of what Donnie is up to, and I strongly suggest that you do, you can go to heartland.org at the Emerging Issues Center page under the Topics tab, which is the main page for his center. All right. Anyway, so I'm Linnea Lueken, your new host. This is my very first time hosting, so please be patient with me. I am learning, and so I already messed up once, and we're going to keep a tally. Okay, so today, as usual, we've got Jim Lakely, Vice President of the Heartland Institute. Jim, how is 2025 looking so far?
2025 is looking pretty great so far. I guess, it's kind of, we call it pulling a Jim when you are muted, when you're supposed to be not unmuted, you're supposed to talk. So hopefully we can come up with a few pull a Linnea coming out here soon, yeah. Which maybe is forgetting the number of the episode at the time.
Yes.
So it's maybe pulling a Linnea, but I'm doing great. It's a new year. I think, people talk about how it feels like there's been a vibe shift in the country and in the world. And before we get into the show, actually, I just want to say that my heart it hurts, and my prayers are with the people of Southern California with those devastating fires, the worst that the LA Basin has seen in probably most people's lifetimes. I used to live for 5 years. I lived in Pasadena, California. I lived right below where those fires were coming. I would have been in an evacuation zone, so I know it very well. I have friends there still, and so stay alive, keep. Be hopeful. You'll be able to rebuild, and we're thinking about you all the time.
Yep, it's really, really bad stuff. And we'll probably touch on that a bit on the Friday show, which is Climate Realism Show. So that's my little plug for that one. We also have a very special guest this week. This is Jon Gabriel, the undisputed king of stuff, according to X. He works with the Ricochet Podcast Network and is also a writer for Discourse Magazine and the Arizona Republic and a bunch of other places. He's also a fiction writer with a new military fiction novel out. Jon, I'm sure I missed a bunch of stuff. You've got a really extensive history. So is there anything else that you want to add here?
Not really. I make really good coffee. I make pour over coffee, and I'll be doing a demonstration later. But yeah, that about covers it.
Thank you very much. All right, for the audience here, before we really get started, I wanted to remind you guys that YouTube hates us. Therefore, if you want to support the show, you can go to heartland.org/inthetank and donate there. If you're a regular YouTube viewer, you already know all of this, but I'm going to say it anyway, in case we have somebody that's like tuning in for the first time, waking up from a multi-decade coma or something. Clicking the thumbs up to like the video and sharing also helps break through some of YouTube's suppression. And even just leaving a comment also helps. All right, so we're gonna launch right into our first topic here, because I know that Jim doesn't care about this topic at all, and it'll be interesting to see his reaction. Heartland Institute, as many of you guys know, is on pretty much all social media. We're pretty well informed about how difficult it is to post what you want, even when it's within the reasonable guidelines of the website. We're also pretty well known for debating the consensus narrative on a variety of topics, especially climate change and some COVID stuff that may or may not be the reason why we're demonetized here. And on Facebook in particular, we're pretty regularly suppressed for questioning those common progressive narratives. So when we see this, a shift in, Meta or Facebook's approach, it's really striking to us. From National Review, we have Meta to replace fact checks with community notes system as Zuckerberg vows to return to free speech. National Review writes, Zuckerberg said after Trump won the 2016 election, Meta tried addressing concerns made by the legacy media about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. As part of that effort, Facebook partnered with a number of prominent legacy media outlets, which were tasked with educating, the veracity of high-profile stories that were receiving significant attention on the platform. But the fact checkers were too politically biased, he admitted, which is why Meta is ending the program altogether. And Jim, I think you have a video for us too.
Yeah, we do. Let me pop this up here.
Okay, sure.
Yeah, here we go.
What has happened over the last several years? There's been widespread debate about potential harms from online content. Governments and legacy media have pushed to censor more and more. A lot of this is clearly political. Even if they accidentally censor just 1% of posts, that's millions of people. And we've reached a point where it's just too many mistakes and too much censorship. The recent elections also feel like a cultural tipping point towards once again prioritizing speech. So we're going to get back to our roots and focus on reducing mistakes, simplifying our policies, and restoring free expression on our platforms.
Okay, I gotta stop it right there.
Yeah. Okay. So, Jim, we don't have any history at all with fact checkers here at the Heartland Institute, of course.
Oh no! No! Our no, it's not as if our Facebook page is completely useless and has been for about a decade because we are, shadow banned and we can't grow. We can't usually even do any Facebook ads for anything. But just getting back to that, there's just a couple things I want to say off the top about this, and I'm interested to hear what my friend Jon has to say about it, as well, as he is a master of social media and and knows that inside and out. But first of all, would any of this been happening if the election turned out the other way? Do you think Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook and YouTube and Google, or who, whatever's going on out there, I guess everything other than Blue Sky, would any of them be now rededicated to allowing Americans to exercise their First Amendment free speech rights? Do you think that would have happened if Kamala Harris won? Of course not. Of course it wouldn't be happening right now. This is happening because, as Mark Zuckerberg realizes, there has been a vibe shift, a cultural shift in this country. And, I don't want to punish him for making the right decision, right? But the idea that now it's okay, Mark Zuckerberg, for you to stand up for free speech rights. I'm very glad this is happening. But you gave $400 million to Democrats on the left to defeat Donald Trump in 2020. Your platform believed the government and the deep state and the CIA. That's another thing. You probably have CIA assets in your company right now. You might want to look around and do something about that so that the censorship actually does stop. But you told the world that the Hunter Biden laptop was Russian disinformation. Now, again, I don't want to punish you for doing the right thing, but how about an apology? How about a real apology and actually a fuller accounting of exactly how your company and every other social media company in the world until Elon Musk bought X was collaborating with the government to illegally destroy the free speech rights of Americans during an election? An apology for that, and then we can listen to more of the video, I suppose.
Well, that's I love it when we get a Jim rant.
Yeah.
I mean, Heartland Institute, like you said, we clash all the time with the fact checkers. I'm strongly skeptical that this is legitimate, and I'm wondering, Jon, if you might agree with me on this. And the reason why I question his change of heart here is partially informed on those lies that he told previously about Facebook censorship during government hearings. You know, and in part because the government hasn't really shown any intent to shut down their own censorship programs and stuff.
This is definitely a trust but verify kind of thing. I applaud him for making the statements he did. At least he admitted, you know, how bad the censorship had gotten. So that is a start. He went to the Censorship Anonymous meeting and said, "Hello, I'm Mr. Zuckerberg, and or I'm sorry, I'm Mark Z, and I am a censor." And that's the first step of recovery. So we'll wait and see. But he's already shown when the winds were blowing a different direction, he was shutting down free speech. So he's trying to keep in the good graces of the government, whether it's a pro-censorship regime as we've had for, gosh, at least 8 years, if not longer. And now he's trying to fit in with a new vibe shift, which living in Silicon Valley, he knows that's going on. That's where this vibe shift terminology even came from. It was about a year ago, last February, when some of the, I think it was Santiago Pelleggi, who noticed this vibe shift that people were speaking out loud, thoughts that everybody was thinking, but previously censored themselves from saying. Even just asking questions about the government and what's going on with printing money, what's going on with the climate exactly, you know, where is all this money going? They would just not talk about it because it was not cool to talk about those kind of things. You just kind of followed the agenda being set by leaders, and you spoke accordingly. And especially since the election, but it really started before that, all the way to February, more and more people are doing this. You know, more people, I don't know, you'd be at a dinner party or be out in public, and it's not, you know, it's not a political place at all, and a waiter would make a crack about Biden, or someone would, you know, I'd get my hair cut, which was too aggressive a couple days ago. I'm debuting it now. In shame, I'm hiding it with my hat. But talking to the barber and him just, you know, never mentioning politics before, and all of a sudden he's just like, man, this country's kind of messed up right now. So it's only intensified since November. I think it's just a matter of zeitgeist. It's a cultural thing more than a political thing. So yeah, Zuckerberg's riding that wave right now. People just have to keep on him so he doesn't change his mind, and he actually follows through with changing who knows how many algorithms that have been suppressing articles. I've seen articles that, you know, I'll write an op-ed, it goes semi-viral, and then no one shares it anymore. Just like shutting a door. It's like, yeah. Oh, okay, I guess that annoyed somebody, so I've been shut down. But that's why I'm barely ever on Facebook anymore, because it's boring. I don't want to just see, I don't know, you know, boring recitations of what I could see if I flipped on CNN or opened the local paper.
Yeah. I mean, and Jim knows this because we have the background for YouTube and stuff. Maybe one of the mistakes that these technocrats made was letting us have access to the analytics of our posts and stuff, because it makes it really easy to tell that something artificial is happening when you have something that's on a pretty good upward trajectory and all of a sudden it flatlines and falls off out of nowhere. And it doesn't have like a gradual, natural looking curve to it. It's just cut.
Yeah. Well, yeah. Linnea is talking about the Climate at a Glance video series that she had done, and we have a new set of those coming on the way very soon. But we did I think 31 or 32 of those, and one of them really took off. I mean, it had 250,000 views, I think, within 24 hours, and then it just went, it just stopped, and that it is impossible. It is impossible that was a natural algorithmic thing. So a human being went in there and decided, a leftist human being went in there and decided, this is not the message I want anyone to see anymore. I'm going to kill it. And having the power to do that behind the scenes is one of the frustrating things about social media. And what I think is good about Elon Musk, many good things about Elon Musk buying Twitter and renaming it X, is that obviously that has had an effect on Mark Zuckerberg. Mark Zuckerberg would not be doing this, again, if the election had gone the other way. He also would not be doing this if Elon Musk did not buy X, because just him doing that one social media service, he is starting to change. That the ripple effect is starting to change, at least starting with Facebook, and I'm sure hopefully YouTube and Google and others. But so he wouldn't be doing this if the election had gone the other way, or if Elon Musk had bought X. And like I said, I hope this actually YouTube really. I mean, this is not going to help us get our channel remonetized, but Google is a problem that they basically shadow ban anything that is not giving off the leftist agenda and message. And they'll let you have your free speech. They will say things like, free speech does not mean free promotion, which is not what anybody honestly is asking for. We just don't want to have, the boot on our neck, having our head pushed down under the water constantly because we don't go along with leftist orthodoxy on climate, especially, and all sorts of other things.
Yep, definitely. Do we
First,
have more of that?
we're going to get rid of fact checkers and replace them with community notes similar to X, starting in the US. After Trump first got elected in 2016, the legacy media wrote nonstop about how misinformation was a threat to democracy. We tried in good faith to address those concerns without becoming the arbiters of truth. But the fact checkers have just been too politically biased and have destroyed more trust than they've created, especially in the US. Second, we're going to simplify our content policies and get rid of a bunch of restrictions on topics like immigration and gender that are just out of touch with mainstream discourse.
All right, I got to stop it right there. There's so much to unpack. I know we could do the whole hour on this, and I could just keep stopping this. But there's the admission that the election. Well, first of all, let me back that up just a bit. He says in this video, we may not get to that part of the audio, but he says that it'll take a couple of months, but we're going to restore your free speech rights on Facebook. It'll take a couple of months. He could have done this at any time. He could have done this in 2020. He could have done this in 2017. He could have done it in 2018. He could have done this at any time. Again, I don't want to punish him and yell at him for doing the right thing. But you were the ones, you were all together, Silicon Valley decided that they could not believe it. They couldn't stand it. We didn't use our power to stop the bad orange man from getting to the White House. We will never let that happen again. We are going to use our power to destroy that bad orange man and punish anybody who had the gall to vote for him will also be punished. And then the society will turn out the way we think it should be instead of the way the people want it to be by voting. And so again, all of this could have been done at any time. It was immediately known, Mark Zuckerberg, that the Hunter Biden laptop was not Russian disinformation. Immediately known. That was bullshit, and everybody knew it. You could have turned the switch right there and said, I'm tired of being lied to. I'm tired of being manipulated by government actors out there. I'm tired of getting emails and phone calls saying, hey, that's a pretty nice multi-billion-dollar social media company you got going there. Be ashamed if something happened to it by the government coming in and regulating you out of existence. He could have said all of these things earlier, and he didn't. He could have stood up for the Constitution earlier, but he didn't. And again, there was the 8th time I've said this. I don't want to punish him for doing the right thing, but it does anger me a little bit that he says things like, yeah, restricting what people could say about, the transgender movement or the election or some other things, it was out of the mainstream. Facebook censoring the by far majority view on controversial topics. Yeah, gosh, I guess that was a mistake because they put us out of the mainstream. One last thing I'm going to say about this, and we should probably move on to another topic, or I will keep going. Is like here's the issue where the proof will be in the pudding: climate change. The transgender issue kind of came out of nowhere. It's pretty obscure. You could call it a new ritual in the leftist religion, transgenderism. Climate is like the Old Testament of leftist social religion. If they allow people to actually say what they think and what the science tells them about the climate, then I will stop punishing them for doing the right thing, because that is the last hurdle they need. The first hurdle, really, they need to jump.
Yeah, I mean, you've got LinkedIn kicking Greg Wrightstone off for just publishing research papers on LinkedIn that are, saying that like there aren't more hurricanes than there were. And it's just the data just shows that. Yeah, it's pretty bad. And I really briefly, before we move on to the next topic, I do want to bring up, because it's related, this report from the New York Post. There was some news going around saying that the government is going to get rid of their Global Engagement Center, which is their censorship center, basically. But it turns out that they're actually just rebranding it under a new name with the same employees. This is from the article. The State Department reportedly notified Congress last month that it plans to shuffle staffers and money from the controversial and now shuttered Global Engagement Center to a new office aimed at countering foreign information manipulation and interference, which is again harkening straight to the, the Russian bot, disinformation stuff. I have no doubt whatsoever that there are people planting fake news online for geopolitical reasons. But Jon, as someone who's been working with media for a long time and has kept his eye on the government like a hawk, do you imagine that the feds are going to now stop trying to manipulate information that they just don't like?
Oh, of course not. And Marco Rubio, when he shows up at state, he needs to, you were talking about the Old Testament, he needs to move up to the Gospels and get a whip and clear out the temple of the money changers, kind of a thing, because that foggy bottom is rotten with political operatives, and they can't be allowed to get away with this chicanery, just shuffling around the cards, shuffling the deck chairs. It's a bad system. It doesn't work, even if they were pure of heart and trying to do the right thing. The way you combat, as everybody knows, the way you combat speech you don't like is with more speech. And that's the only thing that's going to work, especially when the government is involved. As annoying as it is for the social media companies to censor and so forth, they're not included in the Constitution. But I say it's bad for the culture, it's bad for business. But when the government is in charge of doing it, it's just crazy. I'm sure that censoring global misinformation isn't going to get rid of something like the Ghost of Kiev story coming out of Ukraine because the administration likes that. That was a very handy myth for a couple of weeks until it was disproven, and nothing against Ukraine, but that's what we're going to see. We're going to see favored countries, favored conflicts. And who knows, if there's another president, several terms into the future, they could just gin up anything, another reason to invade the Middle East, some Middle Eastern country. So they're not going to censor stuff that they approve of, only things that that don't help them get reelected, that don't help them receive funds. And it's just a terrible idea to leave these people on the taxpayer payroll.
Yeah. Do you know what's more dangerous than disinformation? Government censorship. That's a lot more dangerous than mis or disinformation. And also, just one last thing. I love the idea of the community notes as opposed to relying on the hard leftists at PolitiFact to be the authority, or any mainstream media organization to be the authority on the truth, or the government, the biggest disseminator of mis and disinformation that we've ever seen over the last 5 years. On, you just name the topic, and they were peddling the most disinformation. But the community notes idea is great. If you're experienced, trolling on X, you can see that community notes are actually quite helpful. It's going to be very important in the details on how Facebook institutes their own community notes program. If it's going to be allowed to be dominated by the likes of lefties who work for PolitiFact, it's not going to have the effect that he hopes, and he's going to actually just continue the de facto censorship regime that he says he wants to correct. If it's going to be truly crowdsourced by among users who know what they're talking about and can use citations, again, I can't wait till this is implemented. I'm going to try to do some community notes on false climate alarmist BS, and we'll see if I can get that community note up there. We'll see.
Yep, it definitely remains to be seen. Speaking of things that progressives love being slowly taken away from them, a whole bunch of companies are now seeming to call it quits on DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion initiatives. Andy, you can pull up the little graphic that I made for this. From the AP, we have that McDonald's is the latest in a ton of companies, especially the bigger names that you would recognize, apparently walking back DEI commitments and maybe even in some cases entire departments. The AP reports that McDonald's said Monday it would retire specific goals for achieving diversity at senior leadership levels and end a program that encourages its suppliers to develop diversity training. The company's diversity team will be renamed the Global Inclusion Team. The Chicago burger giant says it remains committed to inclusion and believes a diverse workforce is a competitive advantage. So, not every, I want to emphasize before I open this up for comments that every company is doing this a little bit differently. Not every company's alleged withdrawal is the same type or to the same degree, but we are seeing a general drawback, or at least they're trying to rename things so that they can stop getting yelled at for DEI all the time. So, the AP claims that DEI policies are actually a counterweight to discriminatory practices of the businesses. Jon, do you find that to be true in what we've seen from DEI so far?
Yeah, it was basically forced on companies because they thought it was the polite thing to do. Look, we're tired of getting yelled at for being horrible people, whatever it might be, whatever the social issue might be. But what you're seeing now, this vibe shift, now none of this is to say that, oh, okay, the right won on these issues. Everybody, no one believes it anymore. They didn't believe in DEI either. It's just, it was considered cool in 2018 to create all these initiatives. It's seen as uncool now. Now, when they get together at the country club, the CEOs get Snickers because of their crazy DEI quotas or something like that, and they would rather not get that. So now people are no longer, I remember a few years ago where LinkedIn, every time I checked in, because it's such a riveting site to read in detail, but anytime I'd check into LinkedIn, it was just like, enter your pronouns. I'm like, why would I do that? And then I started seeing all my friends who work in, especially the private sector, he, she, she, her, things like that just started popping up, and a few with jokes. I didn't see their posts anymore, putting jokes where the pronouns were. So it's just, it's a meaning, it's a fashionable thing is why they did it. And it's a fashionable thing on why they're getting rid of it. So I don't think people believed in their heart of hearts that all the crazy manifestations of wokeness that we've seen, they didn't take this stuff to heart. They didn't, bury it in their soul. And, I'm a true believer. I'm committed to this. I'm going out in the streets to protest. They just followed the herd, and that's where the herd was going. And now the herd is abandoning all that stuff. And you're seeing, I know some people in the Hollywood area, and as Jim started the podcast, gosh, please stay safe out there, everyone in Southern California. But I know some people out there, and they're talking about projects. It's like, wow, I couldn't have sold the script a couple of years ago, and now people are buying it. I recently put out a novel, and it was kind of the same thing. It's just like, why bother going through publishers and things like that with sensitivity editors? And, oh, why isn't your hero from a paraplegic from Guatemala with emotional issues? Oh, okay, I'll change World War II history to do that. Instead of going through that, it's just like, how about a book where the hero is a good guy trying to do the right thing? He's not perfect. He loves his country. He's not dealing with emotional trauma. He's not a gritty anti-hero. I think we've been fed this stuff for decades now, and it's just boring. Nobody wants it anymore. So, and you're seeing that, in entertainment, you're seeing it in media, you're seeing it in corporations, and you've already seen it for years in smaller stores, shops, mom and pop businesses who are just like, look, we don't have the resources to do all this crap, so why bother? And you've also seen the rise of a lot of online or virtual HR departments that a lot of small businesses use, because like, look, you guys deal with all this nonsense. Let me know which squares I need to check on my screen. And so we don't have to worry about all this craziness. We're, aligned with state laws, whether I'm based in Oregon or based in Utah. They can align with the state laws without having to deal with all the drama that this kind of victim mentality always brings.
I mean, and there's another angle to this too that I don't think people talk a lot about, and that is that there are, I worked for a, major international kind of company in the past, and we had all these DEI trainings and stuff, and they were odious. And when I say odious, I mean, it wasn't just that it was a waste of time and it was boring. It was like actively insulting and belittling and stuff. It was really, really bad. I wish I had screen recorded it or something to show just how bad it was. But
there's actually a trick
there,
for that I used working in the private sector, if I may interrupt,
yeah,
is I always listen to what the teacher is saying about the requirements of diversity or whatever the latest woke agenda is. I say, what you're saying here is completely insufficient. It does not address the root causes. And then I amplify the wokeness to ridiculous lengths until they have to tell me to shut up and just shut up and pay attention. So it's just like, you're leaving all these other groups out, and I start getting more and more obscure. And then they get annoyed with me, but they usually just think, uh-oh, I'm going to have to teach what this guy says a year from now. This guy's going way too far.
You make them regret putting Jon Gabriel through a struggle session, don't you?
Exactly.
Yeah,
exactly.
yeah. That's almost what I think at this point we would almost call the Matt Walsh approach to
right.
dealing with
exactly.
DEI.
Exactly.
But yeah, no, but it was so bad. And unfortunately, in my case, I couldn't bully them back because they were smart enough to make it a computer module with unskippable videos and stuff that you had to sit through and watch. It was just terrible. But what I was getting at is there's entire companies, like massive companies, that do nothing but produce this stuff. And so there's like a financial incentive to sell DEI programs to major corporations. And it's a huge scam. It's like the craziest that when you really start digging into all the little like rabbit holes and stuff that you can find with that, it's nuts, actually. They contract out, or a major company will contract out, a training company and buy all of their training modules and have you check them off. And that's supposed to, I don't know, cover it for the company. So it's not just DEI either. Some other stuff that's getting killed is also, and I'm hoping that this sticks, but I really kind of don't trust it either. We've got JP Morgan and even BlackRock, who is kind of a big pusher of this, but they're exiting the net zero banking alliances and net zero asset managers initiatives. Specifically, we've got BlackRock. So what I wanted to say about the BlackRock issue in particular, or no, oh, you know what? Let's do JP Morgan. You're right. I'm sorry, guys. I'm a little clumsy here. They are claiming to be withdrawing from their net zero, like environment, social, and governance programs that they are part of. The Net Zero Banking Alliance and the Net Zero Asset Managers Initiative are basically just like collections of companies and organizations that pledge that they're going to make sure that all of their portfolios are directed towards the cause of reducing carbon dioxide emissions, and pursuing different environmental projects and social projects and all of that great stuff that we love so much, including DEI. The fact that they're withdrawing from this stuff makes me kind of suspicious. Not just because, again, like we said with Meta and with the DEI stuff, it seems like there might be just kind of a reframing, especially considering we have the SEC pushing to kind of increase the ESG responsibilities that companies are supposed to adhere to at the same time that this is going on. So, Jim, do you think that this stuff, like, is BlackRock really going to be giving up the climate issue? Is JP Morgan Chase and all the other banks that have withdrawn from these alliances, are they really giving up on those issues, or are they just rebranding it?
I think they might just be rebranding it. On the net zero, I think they're going to have to give it up because that is a complete dead end. They know it is not sustainable. In both the net zero thing and woke corporate wokeism and DEI and all of that in the corporate world, let's understand what that was. That was the left using corporate America to be the enforcement arm of its agenda and what it wants the world to be. The left has been horribly unsuccessful in persuading people that their outlook and views on how we should organize our lives how much energy we should use, how big a house we should have, the kinds of things we should say, the flags we should fly in front of, on our homes and all those sorts of things. The left has very particular ideas about the best way to go about all sorts of different pursuits in life that, ostensibly you're free to choose for yourself. But they were very bad at persuading people that that was the way to go. And when you add in the climate cult, where they think that the way we're living our lives now is literally destroying the planet, and we will be unlivable for human beings within 100 years if we don't go basically put ourselves back to the Stone Age tomorrow. They had a hard time persuading people to make the choices in their own lives to live in that manner. But what they found out that they can do, again, using the government, once they came into more power in the bureaucracies, and especially with the election of first Barack Obama, and then you had the interregnum of Trump there for a bit, and then Biden, they got right back to it and did it in a big hurry. They decided the best way to make the permanent change that we really want to make is to use corporate America as the enforcement arm of our aims. And so this is where you get, and they got arrogant about it, frankly. We played the clip on this show before, and I think we've played it on the Climate Realism show as well. Larry Fink at I think, WEF, World Economic Forum panel, bragging, just stating out overtly that they were using their immense power in the global economy to, quote, force behaviors. We need to force behaviors. And he doesn't mean force behaviors in a rightward direction. He means forcing behaviors by making people, leaving them no choice, because I'm going to bankrupt that corporation. I'm not going to give you loans. We're not going to invest in this sector. And we're going to force behaviors. And that way we can finally get to that leftist utopia. He doesn't say that kind of stuff anymore. Another big catchphrase for the left was the whole of society approach to social change. This was all part of it. It was the thing that frustrated the left, I think, for decades, is that they couldn't get corporate America or the global corporate behemoth to go along with enforcing their ideology. But they have been very successful in that over the last few years. And DEI is a bit, is a part of it. It's a bit part of it. But this net zero thing, the idea that they're not going to invest, you're not going to be allowed to invest in oil or natural gas companies or coal companies, because we need to phase those, those forms of energy out of our global economy for good. The reason you don't hear Larry Fink talking about forcing behaviors anymore is because he did another panel not too long ago, I think within the last year, where he looked at the AI revolution and said, holy crap, we're going to need a lot of energy for those server farms for artificial intelligence. And we have two choices. We can let China be the developer and on the forefront of developing AI by using coal-fired power plants, or we can forget about this wind and solar garbage because it's not strong enough and reliable enough to power our own AI systems. So we're going to have to go nuclear is what he prefers, but maybe natural gas as well. So that's why and where I think net zero is the real abandonment. I really think they are going to abandon the net zero, because there's AI on the one hand, and then there's the climate cult on the other. And there's China competing for both. And actually, China's going for the AI, and we're going to stop running for the climate cult anymore. So yeah, I think all of this is part of that. Is part of that forcing behaviors. That's all gone. I think we've entered, hopefully, a new era in where corporations forcing behaviors is no longer what they're interested in. They're interested in actually making profit and being in the lead in corporate and technological innovation.
Well, I don't want to drag this topic out for too long because we're a little bit behind schedule here on these. But yeah, Jim, actually, I am, again, the more cynical one compared to you on this issue. I think that they are sneaking around, and while they might abandon net zero for themselves, they're not going to abandon it for the rest of us. I think it's far more likely that they're going to invest in like micro reactors, like nuclear micro reactors and stuff, and their own personal power plants, while actively lobbying for net zero green grid stuff in general.
Yeah.
I really think that that's the direction that this is going. It's going to be like a weird, like energy feudalism.
I'm supposed to be the cynical one
I
around here,
know,
Linnea. You're the
I know,
hopeful.
but
Yeah,
I had to bring the hope down for a second
oh,
here.
all right. Well, we'll probably talk about this more on the Climate Realism Show
Yeah.
tomorrow as well, actually.
John, before we move on to our wonderful next topic, did you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, net zero really is running on fumes. Those of us in Heartland Institute definitely has been on the forefront of this. Just the math doesn't work. You don't make your energy policy based on your personal morality. You make it on science, you make it on physics. And there just isn't enough power that can be generated by renewables we have now, unless you include in a big way nuclear. And I was a reactor operator on a submarine. I'm very familiar with the technology, and it is incredibly safe. We know now far more than we did when those submarine reactors were created, and they have been made tremendously safer still. We need to deploy these things. And if anybody can get my hands, so if I can get my hands on a personal modular reactor, that would be great. You can find me at my off-the-grid cabin where I'll just be listening to cool music and drinking coffee and reading old books. So I will never be on a podcast again, which is a tragedy for the internet at large. However, that's really just the way to go. And people have to get over their bizarre phobia about nuclear energy. It usually comes from a place of deep, deep ignorance and fear-mongering by the media.
Yep, true that. Okay, so in my notes, I have this next segment labeled as the Biden administration is sundowning. So we are about to talk about the fact that I hope everybody in the chat here did see the video of Kamala certifying the election. But if you didn't, we're going to kind of play it in the background here. Her facial expressions really cracked me up. It's a little bit sad to watch. It's kind of, I don't know. It's kind of like, I don't know, just kicking her while she's down. But it is kind of funny that she had to certify the election that she lost. So we have from the Daily Signal. Do you have that one for me? Daily Signal. Biden administration admits defeat by withdrawing 7 woke rule changes. The Daily Signal writes, the withdrawals are being hailed as wins by conservatives who have submitted comments against the rules, which would have compelled allowing male participation in girls' sports, prohibited religious exemptions for birth control coverage, taken federal funding away from pregnancy resource centers, and more. Just a bunch of like the most bizarre, unpopular policies you could think of. He did have to back down on those, but unfortunately, he still has been ramming through all sorts of stuff anyway. From Click Orlando, we have that Biden has signed into law 50 bills ahead of Christmas alone. And these are, most of them are kind of little nothings, but every extra bill that gets passed that we didn't need is just more clutter and more garbage that we will have to deal with eventually. Worst of all of them is him attempting to do some like kind of last minute offshore bans or offshore drilling bans. These I'll be able to talk to this issue in a little bit more detail on tomorrow's show, but I wanted to pitch it out there anyway because it's kind of like the death throes, you know, like the last like dying spasms of the Biden administration. And I want to just throw it out to the whole gang here to comment on whatever you feel like with regard to that. I don't think it's overly unusual for an outgoing administration to try to cram through as much of their own agenda as possible. But it's mostly nonsense. He gave out a bunch of awards and stuff to people that are like George Soros, just the worst people that you could think of.
What?
That's right.
What you got, guys?
Well,
John, I think
John
you're
just
muted.
pulled the Jim by talking while
He's
muted.
doing it.
Excelente.
Hi, I'm Jon Gabriel. I just, for years now, I've been saying it's not a Biden administration as much as it's a Biden regency. You have kind of the doddering old king being held up and processed by various counselors who are jockeying for position to get their pet projects funded to gain more land back in the medieval times. But that's what you see going on here. All these goofy staffers throughout the White House are just, hey, if you sign this piece of paper, we'll give you another scoop of ice cream. He's like, all right, I'll do that too. And that's what these things feel like, because they're just so random. They're all over the place, just flinging money hither and yon. And yeah, just giving awards out like crazy. Just like, oh, I get to play president for a couple weeks before I'm booted out and have to return to my home in Delaware. The whole thing has just been pathetic. The past 4 years have been a prime example of elder abuse. Everybody could see it when he ran in 2020, and how the media pretended that he was fine. And boy, we can't keep up with this guy. He's a tiger. No, he's a very, very old man who's been unwell a very long time. And he should be kicking back in a rocking chair at his lake house, dropping a line in the water and hanging out with his grandkids, and now great grandkid, who he announced instead of dealing well with the horrific fires going on in SoCal. So it's just, yeah, it's very much a death row. I love that concept of his entire administration is sundowning, because that's what it feels like. Please go away. We're done now.
Yeah, and a lot of it feels too like he's kind of trying to twist the knife in, for Trump when he's on the way in. And I think Jim had something to comment on that particular theory of why all of this is happening now the way it is. Because now Trump comes in, he has to deal with all this stuff that Biden is doing.
Yeah, I mean, did I rant on something on a message board that we had? That did I rant it and forget? But no,
You may have. I have it closed so it won't ping at me during the show.
I tend to go a little nuts sometimes when these things trigger me, and I take them out on the staff at the Heartland Institute. Look, I mean, they're when you see the stuff that the Biden administration is doing. First of all, if we had a real media that was interested, and it has never been interested at all in having a critical eye, pointing a critical eye at the Biden administration, they would actually, maybe we would see an outrage story or two from the legacy media saying, maybe it's a little inappropriate to Mr. Biden to be implementing some of these radical policies that the American people wholly rejected just a few weeks ago, that this is not what America wants. America voted the other way. And so it would be, it's rude to say the very least, to think that just because you can do it, you should do it. You should implement your policies and ram them down America's throats, good and hard, whether they like it or not. The one policy that I think that it might be, just backing up, there's something called the Congressional Review Act, which Bill Clinton signed in 1996. And it's basically designed to handle a situation like this, when an outgoing administration, the lamest of lame ducks, decides to sign all of these executive orders, or to have their administration, their agencies, the bureaucrats quickly write all of these rules. And a bureaucratic rule has the force of law. You could go to jail if you violate a rule implemented by an unelected bureaucrat. So the Congressional Review Act is supposed to allow expedited review of those new regulations that were put in a lame duck session for a presidency, and then just quickly overturn them. And then on top of that, and this was supposed to be a deterrent to have this kind of shenanigans going on, part of that law says that any similar rule that you try to write just like this in the future is null and void immediately. In other words, don't try to abuse your power like this on the way out when a new administration is coming in, because one of the punishments is going to be you can't even do anything approaching that rule ever again. But the one rule that Biden is that, and Linnea, you could probably speak to this even better than me, was putting, because you used to work on an offshore oil rig, was putting even more of the ocean floor off limits from oil exploration right before Donald Trump gets in, who says he wants to baby drill everywhere he can. And the little wrinkle in this is that the statute that Biden is using to take that seafloor off of oil exploration possibilities basically makes that almost permanent, or at the very least, even harder than normal to reverse with the stroke of a pen. In other words, you can make it the law with the stroke of a pen, but a new president coming in a month later cannot just undo it with a stroke of a pen. It becomes a lot more complicated.
Well,
And
some
if
of
I
this,
can add too,
yeah,
I'm sorry.
shoot.
If I can add too, with offshore drilling, the upcoming issue, everybody's talking about the latest thing being AI, deep sea mining. China is moving very hard into that area, doing tons of research, and that's actually a lot of their submarine program is kind of based on that exploration, and we have to be prepared for that. Russia's involved, and several other countries are getting involved for all these untapped resources in the ocean, which are vastly more plentiful than mines on land. Of course, environmentalists don't want mines on land because I guess they're icky, even though we need them for all their green energy initiatives. And then they say they're against it, looking for it in the ocean because something might happen that's bad somehow. But we need to be doing research into that. Who knows? It might not be profitable at all, but we at least need to be ahead of where we are and research into seeing, there's so many rare earth minerals involved. And right now, China controls all of them. They control all sorts of resources for this green energy revolution, for the batteries, for solar panels, and so forth. And we have to get in the game on these things. And Biden is still stuck in last century.
Right. And I'll definitely be able to go over that a bit more tomorrow. But the areas that it's kind of a little petulant move, because actually the areas that Biden has taken off the table are mostly areas that there isn't all that much production going on anyway. It's still bad. Like, it's still very, it's terrible. But he's like, the West Coast of the United States, the East Coast of the United States. The only offshore drilling that's going on the East Coast is in like Canada. So we're not doing any of that. The
Soon to be
East
America,
Coast,
you mean?
yeah,
Soon to be-
yeah,
yes.
exactly. The East Coast of the Gulf of Mexico, which is right alongside Florida, where a lot of offshore drilling is banned anyway. I mean, he's being a little bit sneaky about it, or at least his staffers that wrote this rule are being a little bit sneaky about it.
We could call Canada West Greenland.
Yeah, exactly. But the so Trump's victory here has really obviously put them all into a tizzy. And the victory of the right over here is not the only one that's occurred in recent years. For our main topic here, we have the most recent other leadership that has just been announced is going to be changing, hopefully for more conservatives, but there's always a chance it could go back to liberals, is that Trudeau, who, from this article in CNN, I'm going to read it off. Leader of the Liberal Party for 11 years and Prime Minister for 9, was facing a mounting set of crises, from Donald Trump's tariff threats to the resignation of key allies and disastrous opinion polls. His resignation could be seen as choosing to jump before he's pushed, ahead of a general election to be held later this year that he is widely expected to lose. And Canada is just the latest in this trend, though, other than Trump's election. As we have this Politico article as well. And this writer explains in this very cope-filled article, the long-standing effort to keep extremist forces out of government in Europe is officially over. I'm going to read a bit off of this one because the article is just, it's so good. All right. For decades, political parties of all kinds joined forces to keep the hard right from the levers of power. Today, this strategy, known in France as cordon sanitaire, I'm not good at French, I'm sorry, is falling apart as populist and nationalist parties grow in strength across the continent. 6 EU countries, Italy, Finland, Slovakia, Hungary, Croatia, and the Czech Republic, have hard right parties in government. In Sweden, the survival of executive relies on a confidence and supply agreement with the nationalist Sweden Democrats, the second largest force in parliament. In the Netherlands, the anti-Islamic firebrand Geert Wilders, I'm very sorry if I mispronounced that, is on the verge of power, having sealed a historic deal to form the most right-wing government in recent Dutch history. Meanwhile, hard-right parties are dominating the polls across much of Europe. In France, far-right leader Marine Le Pen's National Rally is cruising at over 30%, far ahead of President Emmanuel Macron's Renaissance Party. Across the Rhine, Alternative for Germany, a party of police surveillance for its a party under police surveillance for its extremist views, is polling second, head-to-head with the Social Democrats. Okay, so obviously, a lot of these guys are, European right wingers, which nowadays is not so extreme. Unless, of course, your central axis lies somewhere around like Trotsky. um, Europe is also not the only place that we're seeing this kind of stuff. We've also seen Javier Milei in Argentina. He's been quite a bit of a firebrand. Everybody likes him up here, at least. I don't actually know how Argentina is taking it, but hopefully well. So, Jon, so we've got left-leaning groups like Politico here that are just like losing it. Are they like totally missing the point though? Because it seems to me that the rising popularity of these guys has something to do with, I don't know, the policies of, progressivism for the last several decades. It's a reaction. It's not, like a, the return of the empire or something, but.
Yeah. Anytime an older government is thrown out, it's because they were fired. It's not necessarily because the new government or the new party, the new president, whatever it might be. It's not because they're the greatest thing since sliced bread. Usually, it's because people are ticked off. They're tired of being lied to. They're tired of seeing their standard of life decrease, their economies collapse. Germany was standing, the standing giant looming over Europe 10, 15 years ago. Now they can't turn on a light bulb because they're out of energy. So people have seen the disastrous run that these left-leaning governments have had, and they're tired of it. Trudeau is a perfect example of this. Their economy is in shambles. And now if you look at the income per capita for Canada, it's equivalent to the state of Alabama, which is the fourth poorest state in the union. People notice these things. And as a kid, I used to go back and forth over the border. My parents or my grandparents lived in Sault Ste. Marie, Michigan, right on the edge of Canada. And there's a Sault Ste. Marie, Ontario as well. And it was just a quick day trip we'd take up there. And everything looked about the same. Didn't matter which side of the border you're on. Now, Canada doesn't feel like kind of a miniature, more polite America. It feels darker, definitely, with anti-free speech stuff, which has really offended a lot of people, scandal after scandal, which the compliant Canadian media wouldn't cover. And now clips going viral of Pierre Poilievre, who's the likely Conservative Party leader who will take over whenever they do hold an election. People have seen the results of their governments and they're done with it. And for the media, you see this a lot in the UK, media just mutter right wing and expect people to run in terror. I'm sorry, protecting national borders is common sense. It is not right. It is not left. And that's why you see so many lifelong liberals, lifelong Democrats choosing to vote for parties they never considered in the past because they're like, this is just nuts. Can somebody stop this? At least we stop the lurch to the left, if not going full on right. At least we have to stop this craziness. Because people just see the results of their policies. They don't work. It's that simple.
Yeah, I mean, I have a pretty hard time believing that the Sweden Democrats are this like firebrand right-wing, hard right extremist group.
Pushing the new Swedish empire.
Yeah. I mean, I very strongly doubt that, just as I doubt that our friend Millie down in Argentina is going to start giving helicopter rides. It's kind of like, you see, it's the same stuff that they did to Trump, right? Where they came and the whole entire, body of mainstream media said that he was some kind of a far right extremist for years and years. Oh, thank you very much, Andy. That's terrific. Yeah. See, they're pretty happy with him. It looks like. I can't really read it too well. Approve. Yeah, there we go. That's nice. We like him too. We love the idea of slashing 90% of our federal bureaucracy. It's just like what they did with Trump. And what ended up happening with Trump is a lot of people looked at him after all of the media hysterics and they said, look, this guy is pretty casual, actually. I mean, he's not exactly, even as far as American conservatives go, he's not that right wing. He's not that conservative. So when you see the same stuff being said about like Nigel Farage or anybody else that's kind of rising in European politics, you can't help but roll your eyes and not take them too seriously. Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I think you look at the, I helped do the research for this part of the thing today, and I had, I don't know, 500 links I sent to
Yeah,
you, and you were
I
very
I
nice to edit
I
them
kept
down.
it. Yeah.
But
Thank
just
you very
looking at
much
the
for that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
just looking at the headlines for these, this is The Sun in the UK. Dutch Trump, meet Europe's most dangerous man, Gert Wilders. In Italy, BBC, Giorgia Meloni, Italy's far right wins election and vows to govern for all. Austria, far right gets chance to form government in Austria. That's from the Wall Street Journal. And so, but if you actually looked at the policies of these so-called far right politicians in Europe, they would probably land to the left of me and you and most Americans. They would fall to the left, I would think, of what we would call mainstream conservatism over the last 20 years. All you need to do to get yourself labeled far right in a European country by the European press and the American press is to deviate from the leftist agenda by 3% at most, and then suddenly you are far right. It's like that infamous or famous cartoon where there's a guy ideologically, he's kind of stayed the same, and all of people that used to be, he thought were liberals are running so far to the left that he is now right wing, and that's the way it works in Europe. That's the way it works here in the United States as well. I mean, notice that the headline for in CNN, it just says simply, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has announced his resignation. What happens now? It's not far leftist Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, which is what he was. It wasn't leftist, dictator Justin Trudeau, the man who had people's assets seized if they marched upon Ottawa to protest against, mass mandates and lockdowns. That's a tyrannical move. There's the cartoon. Thank you very much, Andy. If people can see it on the screen. So the left is never labeled as hard left, even when they are. And Justin Trudeau was definitely a leftist, WEF worshiping leader who thought nothing of trampling on the rights of their citizens to express themselves and to basically just get on with their lives as normal. And he has been rejected. And that's the title of this podcast today is Purge of the Global Progressives. And when the progressive governance has been kicked out everywhere, basically in the Western world, at least places that really matter, I was, just a humble brag here. I was driving Nigel Farage around here in the United States for a day, and I was talking to him when we were going to film something at a cigar lounge. James Taylor, our president, was going to talk with him. In fact, you can still go to heartland.org and you'll see it as one of the featured things, a wonderful interview between the two gents. But I remarked to him as we were on our way that before Trump was elected in 2016, Brexit happened. And it was something that none of the elites and the so-called smart set in Europe, the UK, or the United States had seen coming. And it was not that close of an election, to be honest. And I asked Nigel Farage, I said, that seemed like a harbinger of change here in the United States too, because Trump won election, 8 months after Brexit. And then just before the 2024 elections here in the United States, there was a parliamentary election in the UK. And Nigel Farage's Reform Party, although I think it only grabbed 3 seats ultimately when it all shook out, did way better than people had ever expected, because the Reform Party was, for all political purposes, was invented 20 minutes ago. And I said, your success there, do you think that's another harbinger of change here in the United States? And it turned out to be true. And so what I think, and what I think you're seeing globally was the rise of Javier Milei, a hardcore economic libertarian who campaigned with a chainsaw that didn't have a chain on it, but he revved that thing up and promised to cut the government, with a chainsaw, not a scalpel. And that that imagery was on purpose. He's like, our government is too out of control to use a scalpel. We need to use a chainsaw. And he won, and I think that was a harbinger. But you see all these places in Europe, they've rejected leftist governance. I think it's going to last for a while, because I really think the people, when finally given the chance to express themselves, are purging their governments and societies of progressives and the progressive left's agenda. This is why at the very top of this podcast, Linnea, you asked, how's 2025 doing? After thinking about what we're going to talk about on our first podcast of 2025, yeah, it's going to be a good year when you think about all of the ways that that not just the American people, but people all over the world who are allowed to have a voice in their government are embracing freedom, rejecting tyranny, and telling the progressive left that we've had enough. We're going in a different direction. Even Finland, Jon Gabriel, even Finland, as the third most prominent Finnish American, Jon Gabriel, you must be very happy. And there are
Yes,
only prominent Finnish Americans, but you must be
my
very
ancestral
happy
homeland is coming around slowly but surely, getting more. They don't really care what the rest of Scandinavia does because they don't trust anyone living next door to a rather aggressive neighbor to the other side. And yeah, there's conservative reforms going on there as well, which is great to see. So I understand why my ancestors fled. Well, my forebear fled originally because the Russian mob was trying to collect a debt. And so he jumped on a ship in Vasa, I think it was, and sailed off to the UP of Michigan. But that aside, I think other ancestors must have fled there for more legitimate reasons. But it's good to see because, again, it's just common sense. This stuff doesn't work. And once again, like after the election that we had, the left is all like, we must have a messaging problem. Let's change our terminology. It's like, guys, you have been pushing that for 20 years. It's not the messaging, it's the results. And that's why you can have someone, it wasn't the eloquent speeches that Milei gave that won him the vote. No, it was the results of all the governments before him, from Peronist to the military coup that was around in the 80s and early 90s, I think. People saw all those previous efforts failed. So we're like, hey, let's give this guy a try. Maybe we should just, I don't know, cut back expenses in governmental control and let freedom ring.
Thank you very much. Well, unfortunately, guys, thank you, Jon Gabriel, for sticking with us as we went a little bit over time today. Unfortunately, that's all the time we have. Thank you, everybody, for tuning in. We're live every single week on Thursdays at noon on Rumble or Twitter, Facebook, YouTube. Maybe not Facebook this time, wherever they let us be. For audio listeners, please rate us well on whatever service you're using. Please leave a review. It helps us a lot. And thank you so much again to Jon. I'm sure you have some stuff to plug here. Where can our audience find you, and what's the title of your book so we can go buy it?
Well, yeah, I was just reading this book. I'll read a few chapters now, but whoever this author is, just incredible. No, it's the best debut novel I've ever written, I must say. Sink the Rising Sun. Using my brilliant award-winning career as a submarine guy to talk about World War II submarines. It's a lot of fun to write, and it seems to be selling well. So if you're interested in that kind of middle-aged man-focused stuff, that's your book.
Thank you so much. And Jim, what have you got?
You can find me at Jay Lakely on X. Also visit at Heartland Inst on X. And definitely got to follow XJon on X. If he gives you a follow back, it will make your week. So we will see you on social media. And always visit heartland.org and get that book, Sink the Rising Sun. I just got it myself, and I'm looking forward to reading it, Jon.
All right, thank you.
And you forgot to mention that it beat Tom Clancy this for at least
yes,
a short
I
time.
crushed. Amazon thinks I'm better than a deceased author, which is quite an honor. But yeah, number one over Clancy's number two, so that felt kind of good. Sorry, Tom.
It's wonderful. Okay. You can find me, you guys, at Linnea Lueken on Twitter. Please come check us out tomorrow at the Climate Realism Show. We stream live at the same time, noon Central on Fridays, to close out the week on a little bit of climate and energy news. Always check out heartland.org. And well, thank you guys all for coming, and thanks for bearing with me on my very first hosting opportunity here. So I will see you guys next week. Have a good one.
You are fake news.